Welcome to church this morning. We're so glad you're here. I'm Amy. I'm one of the pastors here, and I want to share a little story with you about a season of our lives in 2014. We were living up in Yellowknife in the Northwest Territories. I actually think Jordan opened with a story about Yellowknife. We actually have other life experience besides Yellowknife, but there was a lot of teaching moments in Yellowknife. And when we were living up there, we invited a girl from the youth group that I had been serving in when we had lived in Abbotsford to come and live with us and save some money because she wanted to travel. And she had just graduated high school that previous spring, and she just was really new to the real world, I'll put it. And we'll call her Lisa. And a couple months into her time living with us, Lisa had gone to work, and she returned home to our fourth-floor walk-up apartment, and she had eyes as big as saucers, and she comes in the door, and she's looking at Jordan and I, and she goes, "I need to tell you something." And by the look on her face, I was like, oh my gosh, what is she going to tell us? And so she sat Jordan and I down, and I took a deep breath because I felt a level of responsibility for her. I felt like I was kind of like her mom away from home. She was away from her family, all of these things, and I was just preparing myself for whatever was about to come out of her mouth. And she takes a deep breath, and I take a deep breath, and we're all sitting there, and I'm just like, my imagination is running wild. And so she goes, "I scraped up the car while backing out of our parking spot this morning." And I went, and I was expecting her to say something far less easily repairable. I was expecting her to tell me, like, she had started in a gambling ring. Like, I don't know. My mind was just like all over the place. So then I suddenly thought, oh, we should actually go and check the car. So we go down to our parking spot, and sure enough, in our beloved little Toyota Corolla, she had gouged a giant scrape all along the side of the driver's door and back door, backing out of our stall. She had hit the cement parking, the column. That's the word I'm looking for. She hit the column, and it was deep, and it was bad. It looked expensive, but I was like, we can manage this. This isn't that bad. And so I knew she felt bad. I knew she felt so bad that she had borrowed our car, and she'd damaged it. And we began the process of making the claim and getting the work done. And finally, when the dust had settled and I had reassured her 10,000 times that we weren't mad, it's okay, things happen, she looked at me with relief and she goes, "I'm so glad. I was trying to figure out what to do. I even went to Canadian Tire to buy a can of gray spray paint and cover it up, but I couldn't find the right color of gray." Have you ever looked for a quick fix? Because in that moment, I was like, oh my gosh, thank you for not doing that. That would have made it 1,000 times worse. But a quick fix, right? We're a society built on quick fixes. Take these supplements, your hair will grow to the floor. Take this course, you'll learn to play the piano effortlessly in 2 weeks, not naming any names, my mom. Those clickbait ads that are like, scientists have discovered the new superfood that burns fat and takes away your cellulite and builds muscle while you sleep, and it reverses age and it bakes you cookies. You just have to click that ad, and then you just have to put in your credit card information. It's amazing. Mental clarity. If you just drink this tea every morning, we want that. That mysterious thing that's going to change our lives. You know what it is for me? A new agenda, a new notebook. I'm like, this notebook. This will be the notebook that I will use, and everything in my life will be organized if I use this notebook. I have 10,000 more. Or maybe this organization app, that's what I need. I need this app, and my life will not be chaotic anymore. And then Jordan reminds me we have 3 children, so it's always going to be a circus. Anyways, we're always intrigued by the idea of this is it. This is the fix I'm looking for. That pain in my neck, that insecurity, that relationship issue. Don't get me wrong. Don't hear what I'm not saying, because we all know there are very real needs. There are very real issues that we are desperate for relief for. That prognosis, that disorder, that depression that you know is coming as winter comes and the days get darker and you can just feel that fog rolling in once again. You know what winter is going to look like. We're left with very real the sense that only a miracle could change the outcome of what this looks like. We use language like this all the time. Even people that didn't grow up in church or aren't even familiar with church will say, it'll take a miracle, or we're praying for a miracle, or only God could save this situation. Or, we could football term it and just say, like, we're just going to throw a Hail Mary, right? Which actually does have some kind of church reference anyways. But it's this term, this idea of miracles, and for some reason there is still this, like, what we'll call, like, this idea of miracles and healings that we don't really believe them, but we don't want to rule them out, but they don't really sound logical if we actually think about it. When we hear somebody's experienced a miraculous healing or a modern day miracle, we can't help but kind of say, yeah? Like, tell me more. Like, we're kind of, and it's half to, like, because you're interested, but it's also the other half is you're kind of like, okay, buddy, I'll tell you what happened there. I'll tell you what really happened. But why? Why are we intrigued? Why do we want to know? Why do we want to know why that miracle happens, or what that miracle was, or what are the details? And you know what I think I've discovered it is? I'll tell you what I think I discovered it is. It's hope. But hope is a double-edged sword, because you hear of someone else in your shoes that suddenly gets that break that you've longed for, the test results you've longed for, the positive pregnancy test you've longed for, and you think, if it can happen for them, maybe it can happen for me. And hope stings a little bit, because there is this hope that maybe something, and you kind of get your hopes up, but you're also afraid that your hopes might be dashed. But, as all things on the internet go, I know more than one person that has been faked out by an internet scam, or they've won a contest. You know those people. They might be my mother. My poor mom, she's really great, guys. She falls for a lot of internet things. We have Photoshop. Things are not always as they appear. My parents always used to say, I'd be like, wow, look at this thing. And my parents would say, if it looks too good to be true, then it probably is. Jordan goes with a really long answer. Is. It's probably not true, Jordan. Okay, it's probably not true. But you just hear of that person that just got that answer, that they won the lottery, or they just had their cancer disappeared. The scans they was there, and now it's not. Can God really do that for me? Do you think God could really answer my prayer? The miracle cure, the miracle answer? You know who I put most of my expectations in for the quick fix, for the right answer? My medical professionals. My doctor, my acupuncturist, my therapist. I'm hoping that if I just give them enough details, if I tell them, like, it's in my neck, and it's kind of like this pain, that it just kind of feels like a nyeh, nyeh, nyeh when I turn to the right like this, you know what I'm talking about? If I just give them enough of the detail, and like, it started hurting when I was shoulder checking, I'm really hoping that they're going to just be able to magically fix it. They're going to know. Or perhaps if I just explain with enough detail my family story of all the different quirks of my family, my therapist is going to say, this is the issue and this is how you fix it. I'm really, really hoping that they will just have the answer for me. I always go to my doctor like that. We're looking for a cure. So this morning as we begin, if you brought your Bible this morning, we're going to continue in the book of Luke. Chapter 8, we're starting at verse 40. And I'll give you a minute while I give you some context. We're continuing in our series, The Spectator's Look at Jesus. And as we look at these passages today, I'm going to give you the backstory of where Jesus is coming from. Jesus is coming straight off of two miracles. If you're familiar with either of these stories, I'll just touch on them briefly. One of them is he's traveling in a boat with his disciples when they encounter an insane storm. And it turns out Jesus sleeps almost as deeply as my husband does, because he doesn't notice it at all. He doesn't notice the storm, and his disciples wake him up, and he's like, we are going to die, do something. And Jesus says, be still. And that's it. There goes the storm. It's gone. And the disciples are left with their minds blown that who is this God that can, or who is this guy who can just calm a storm? He has the authority over a storm. And then the second is they get off this boat and they are greeted by a demon-possessed man. And this man is, he literally has chains around his wrists because he is broken free of his restraints because he is just so out of his mind. He's got this superhuman strength, and Jesus casts these demons out of him. And they're all just like flabbergasted. Nobody has been able to find a cure for this man, and now here he is sitting at Jesus' feet, fully clothed and in his right mind. And people are just scratching their heads at who is this Jesus? So it's here we're going to continue in our series, and we're going to explore the idea of Jesus as healer. And the passages we're going to look at today are certainly not the first miracles, and they're certainly not the last, but we're going to zero in on what I'll call a doublet, which is a real word, by the way. A doublet of stories, two stories that are woven together that I think do an excellent job of both portraying the human condition, but also speak to the character and the identity of Jesus, which, of course, is the hope of this series, is to understand the person of Jesus slightly better. So last week, Jordan talked about, I'm going to just back up for 1 second. Jordan talked about, he read this passage from the book of Luke, and he said, Jesus came not to heal the healthy, but to heal the sick. It's not the healthy that need a doctor, but the sick. And we're going to dive into a little deeper today. We were kind of talking last week about who were the sick, who did Jesus attract? And this week, we're going to be talking about what did Jesus do for the sick? So in Luke 8:40-42, this is where we're going to begin. Now when Jesus returned, a crowd welcomed him, for they were all expecting him. Then a man named Jairus, a synagogue leader, came and fell at Jesus' feet and pleaded with him to come to his house because his only daughter, a girl of about 12, was dying. Jairus is a respected synagogue leader. It takes a lot to get to that position. He's a man in good standing. He's got this spiritual and moral authority in his area. And for Jairus to come and be a man that would fall at the feet of Jesus, Jesus is a guy that's still a question mark for the majority of religious leaders. And if not a question mark, an enemy of the faith. That he's this renegade leader, he's breaking all ceremonial and all the customs of the Jewish faith. And here comes Jesus, who just continues to just upset the social norms of the day. But yet, here comes Jairus, a man of high moral and religious standing who throws himself at the feet of Jesus. Even in today's society, that just gives this automatic portrayal of submission, this automatic portrayal of that this person is worthy of respect. I can't help but see the desperation for a stoic man like Jairus to throw himself at the feet of Jesus is just so visceral. And I like to sometimes think of myself in these contexts about what's the emotion I would experience. And I'm going to share a little tidbit about myself with you. I don't do well with traveling. And it's not the traveling that's difficult for me, it's the making sure we catch our plane, ferry, train, bus even. Like the SkyTrain is about the only thing I don't get anxiety about because I know in like 5 minutes there will be another one and it'll be the right one because they all go to the same place as long as I'm at the same spot. But I get really nervous. I'm that girl that's like at the gate before they've even switched it from whatever the previous flight was that's boarding. I'm like sitting right beside the door like, I'm ready, I'm here, I don't want to miss it. It drives my husband insane because it's a quirk, okay? Marriage is about give and take, okay? So my first Christmas ever going to Nova Scotia with Jordan to meet his family, I was flying home solo back to Abbotsford, and I was a little bit nervous. It was the longest flight I'd ever taken by myself, and the night before I left, Jordan said, hey, you're not taking a carry-on, you've just got your bag? And I said, yeah. He goes, hey, could you take my carry-on bag with all the Christmas gifts? I don't have enough space. So I said, sure. So we packed all of the Christmas gifts into my carry-on bag. And we finished up for the night, and we got to the airport in the morning, and I'm already feeling like a little bit anxious, and then I always get a little bit nauseous when I'm tired, so I'm there super, super early in the morning, and of course it's just after Christmas, so it's super busy. There's people everywhere, and I get into the security lineup, and I'm waiting, and I'm waiting, and I'm waiting, and I watch as this side door opens, and one of the border agents, he comes out, or the security agents, or whatever they are, TFSA? No, that's like a... What is that? That's a tax-free savings account. It's fine. Transport safety. I am better with technology. Jordan is better with the law. It's fine. So this is why I'm not good at travel. So anyways, they open this door, and this guy comes out, and one agent yells to the other agent, yeah, he had liquids in his bag. He's just got to repackage them and then let him back through. And I'm looking at this guy, and I'm like, moron. I've got all my liquids in my little baggie right here. Yeah. And I'm waiting, and I'm waiting, and I'm getting nervous because I see I have half an hour till my flight begins boarding, and for me, that is way too close. Way, way, way too close. So I'm waiting, and I'm waiting, and I'm waiting, and I finally get to the front, and I go through the scanner, and I hand them my passport, and I see them, like, looking at that little x-ray screen, and it's going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And I'm like, oh, that's not my bag, is it? And I'm like, no, you're fine. You got your liquids in the little bag. You're fine. And I'm looking, and I've got like 20 minutes. I'm like, okay, this is getting too close for me. Like, I'm starting to get anxious. And so finally, he says, ma'am, is this your bag? And I said, yes. And he says, can you come over here, please? I said, yes. And I said, don't panic. You know, even if there's an issue, you know, they'll just check your bag at the gate. I've seen them do it before. It's fine. And he says, did you pack your own bag? And I said, yes. And he goes, is there anything in here you'd like to declare? And I'm like, did I get nail clippers for Christmas? Did I get a manicure set? I'm like trying to think. I'm like, I don't think so. And he goes, do you mind if I open your bag? And I'm like, no. But I'm like, can you hurry up because I got to get to my gate. And so anyways, as he's unzipping my bag and goes to open the lid, I suddenly have this epiphany, and I went, oh, there's a drill in my bag. I had completely forgotten that Jordan had received a drill for Christmas, and it had escaped my thought process when I'm packing all of Jordan's gifts in my bag that, lo and behold, I packed a drill. And I'm like, stay calm. Stay calm, it's fine, they'll check it at the gate. I said, can I check it at the gate? He goes, no, ma'am, you need to go back to the desk and you need to check this bag. And I'm like, but my flight board's in 20 minutes. And he goes, well, you better hurry. And so I begin, and I'm like, I'm gonna kill Jordan. I packed the bag, but I'm so mad that he got a drill for Christmas, and I'm like rushing through the airport. Now, if there's anything that I like just as much, maybe slightly less, it's making a public scene, so I'm trying to like hurry through the airport, but I'm looking at the time, and I'm seeing I am not gonna make my flight. So I break into a run as I'm carrying my suitcase, and I am absolutely in a flap. Like, I have lost all dignity at this point. I'm sweaty because it's winter, and I'm wearing 1,000 layers, and I've got my bag and my other bag, and I'm running, and I get to the counter, and I'm like, I need to check this bag. I have to check this bag because I have to get on my flight. My flight board's in 10 minutes, and I remember my hands were like this. Like, I was a basket case. And the agent behind the desk goes, okay, I'm not gonna charge you for this bag because if I do, you might miss your flight. I'm like, okay, thank you so much. And then I run back to security, and thankfully they let me through, and they're kind of like, that's the moron with the drill in her bag. So I get on the flight, and I sit down, I make my flight, thank you very much. I sit down, and I'm texting Jordan, and it's like not even coherent because I'm just so flustered, and I'm like, there's a drill in my bag. And Jordan goes, why didn't you leave the drill? It's worth $50. And I'm like, this is your drill, Jordan. Like, I thought this was important to you. I did this for you, and you don't even care. Not only that, but it was a corded drill, so I've got like a 2-foot radius. If I'm gonna take over this plane, it's gonna be within 2 feet of myself because I had to find an outlet, which I don't even know if they have those on planes, and then watch out, everybody, because I am basically a dog on a leash with an electric power tool. Anyways, I have completely lost all composure at this point. I am just sweaty and a mess, and that is how I picture Jairus to be. Is this, I don't even care, my daughter is dying. And everything about that moment would make me assume that his desperation eclipsed his dignity. So Jesus, of course, heads on his way. And as he's on his way, he encounters an interruption. It says, Luke 8:42. As Jesus was on his way, the crowds are almost crushing him, and a woman was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years, but no one could heal her. She came up behind him and touched the edge of his cloak, and immediately the bleeding stopped. "Who touched me?" Jesus asked. When they all denied it, Peter said, "Master, the people are crowding and pressing against you." Think about this for a second. Like, Jesus is on this 911 call. This woman's life, this little girl's life is at stake. There's people surrounding him. Think like it's like Harry Styles after a concert, the girls, the Beatles, whoever you want. Pick the person from your generation. The Backstreet Boys. Like, there is just people, throngs of people. They are all the way around. And he's like, "Somebody touched me." And everybody's like, "Hello, Jesus, read the room. Everybody's touching you." And I would be, if I was Jairus, I would be like, "We don't have time for this. We have to go." It would have absolutely driven me insane. My child's life is at stake, and you're concerned about who touched you? Have you ever been with somebody who's not in a rush? It is painful. My dad can be 20 minutes late for something, and he still drives the speed limit, if not below the speed limit. And I love my dad, but I just want to wring his neck. I'm like, "Dad, let's go." Doesn't matter how late he is, he's never in a rush. If I was Jairus at this point, I would be like just trying to be respectful, but also like, can we hurry this along? But Jesus says, "Somebody touched me. I know that power has gone out from me." He's like, "Great, Jesus, that's great, but let's keep going. Who cares?" Jesus does. Jesus cares. Because Jesus has the unlimited power to care for your every single particular situation just as much as he cares for every single other person's particular situation. And there's a woman. She is desperate. She's risked it all. This woman, it says, has been bleeding for 12 years, nonstop bleeding. Scholars believe this was some kind of like a menstrual issue. She's exhausted all of her options. She spent all her money on doctors. And I can imagine if any kind of health thing, it's like everybody has a suggestion for you. Have you had your hormones checked? I have a friend that had something similar, and it turned out to be this. You should see that naturopath. That's what you should do. Have you tried cutting sugar from your diet? Every time somebody offers some glimmer of hope and she thinks, could this be the solution? But she's exhausted. Physically, emotionally, socially, I'm sure spiritually. It's like, God, will this ever get better? Prolonged illness takes a toll. Yet here she is, still in the same condition, her life ruined by this illness, lonely, because a woman that was menstruating, a woman on her period, by Levitical law, by the Jewish law, would have been considered unclean. No man would have touched her for fear of contaminating himself. Actually, they'd go so far as they wouldn't look at her in case they would contaminate themselves. Imagine how isolating that is. And so she's been a social outcast for 12 years. And yet, she reaches out in hope to touch Jesus. She comes in the midst of a crowd and hoping that the crowd will disguise her so she can just maybe touch the hem of his garment. Because probably if she had tried to approach him any other time, people would not have let her get near him. They would have said, no, you cannot come to Jesus. Does he know who you are and what you've done? And it continues. Then the woman, seeing that she could not go unnoticed, came trembling and fell at his feet. In the presence of all the people, she had told him why she touched him and how she had been instantly healed when she touched him. Then he said to her, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace." Her and Jairus do have that in common. They are both desperate for a miracle. Her desperation took what little dignity she had left to touch, to come out in public, to be around people who would just be disgusted by her presence. Her desperation and her faith that Jesus could heal her overtook any fear of anybody else's opinion she might have had. But we'd be remiss not to examine Jesus in this moment, because it tells you a lot about people, how they respond to the unexpected interruptions in life, when something in the schedule suddenly changes and it's not in their plan. But can I tell you what my beautiful Jesus does? He responds with compassion and tenderness, which this would have been so surprising, because this was an unclean woman, no less, like a lesser member of society. And he is spending his power, his time, his attention on this? That is remarkable. We don't really understand, we don't have a robust feeling of what it is to be unclean in our culture. And of course, probably the closest thing to memory would be at the beginning of COVID, when you'd all stand 6 feet apart. I remember friends would come to my yard and we'd be talking from 6 feet and my dog would walk past. They'd go like this in case the dog was carrying COVID. We weren't sick or anything, but just in case. My unclean dog. Probably what actually is probably the closest comparable would be the AIDS epidemic in the early 90s. Catherine Campbell quotes a high school senior dealing with the ramifications of an AIDS diagnosis in her published academic paper, Understanding and Challenging the Stigma of AIDS and HIV. This is the quote: "If you have AIDS, you die twice, because the first thing that kills you is being lonely when everyone discriminates against you, even your family members. The second one is the actual death." How devastating. And we see here Jesus is breaking all the norms. He's breaking all the cultural and ceremonial norms of the day, and he's making himself potentially unclean. He's touching people that in a culture that if you were ill, if you had a deformity, if you had a disability, you had done something to deserve that. Or your family had done something to deserve that. And that person should probably have to live with those consequences. It serves them right. But that isn't how Jesus operates. Jesus comes and he gives this woman his full time, attention, respect. That's why karma doesn't hold up. The idea of karma in our society, or even in some religious beliefs, this idea of that person is there for a reason. They did something, and that is of their own fault, and they have to live with that. What would it be for us to give them any kind of any kind of favor or merit or grace? What does that say about us? Absolutely not. But this unmerited grace that God bestows, the way Jesus reacts and acts and talks to this woman, continues to change our perspective on what God thought about those that deserved it. It undercuts that rabbinic tradition of those people. They brought that on themselves, because here comes Jesus, who cuts through all of that and shows love and mercy and forgiveness and restoration. Verse 48, then he said to her, "Daughter." Do you catch that? The sense of belonging, the ownership of family. You belong here. Your faith has healed you. Go in peace. And she is healed. She has peace with God. She has peace in her body. And we get this perspective. This is a theological thing called the already and the not yet. It's this tension of we get to see what it looks like to have fullness and restoration on this side of eternity. But knowing that this woman, she'll still age. She's still going to pass away, because this earthly life is temporary. But it gives us a moment when we get to see a miracle. It pulls back that veil on eternity. We get to see what it looks like to be restored. It's the already, it's the here and now, when we have those moments of healing, those moments of restoration in our lives. But we know that there will be a greater healing and a greater restoration on the other side of eternity. You know what I can't help but think of in this story? Is just as he gives her this time and attention, he's not concerned with labels. He's not concerned with status. And it makes me think of one of my childhood heroes, Mr. Rogers. Seriously, he's a folk hero in my household growing up. This is one of my favorite Mr. Rogers quotes. "I am talking to you So right now, you are the most important person to me. Our conversation is the most important thing in the world to me right now. How beautiful is that? That's the kind of attention and intentionality that Jesus gives. So let's pull ourselves back. Let's focus back on Jairus, because I'm sure he's literally like this. And so verse 49, while Jesus was still speaking, someone came from the house of Jairus, the synagogue leader, and said, "Your daughter is dead. Don't bother the teacher anymore." Man, have you ever heard a wail of despair? It is absolutely haunting. It is heart-wrenching. Despair meaning the complete loss or absence of hope. It doesn't say this, but I imagine he let out that kind of a wail. There's no hope left. Jesus was on his way. But why bother anymore? She's gone. We're too late. Death is final. There's nothing left to hope for. But here comes Jesus, who understands. I'm sure he heard that wail. He understands the lack of hope, and he's so compassionate, even in that moment of this man's like, that's it, nothing can be done. I don't know about you, but my children, they accidentally break their Lego creation, and it is like, ah! And I'm like, let me fix it. Like, you can't fix it. It's broken forever. And I'm like, let me tell you how Lego works. I can fix it. But this moment, he's like, nothing can fix it. It's done. It's the extinguishing of hope. And hearing this, Jesus said to Jairus, "Don't be afraid. Just believe and she will be healed." Oh my goodness. I would have gotten physical with Jesus at that point. Do you not understand? She is dead. I would have grabbed him by the shoulders and shook him. But maybe Jairus is holding on to a tiny shred of hope because he has just seen this woman. He's just seen the miracle that has taken place in her life. So he continues on. When he arrives at the house of Jairus, he did not let anyone, this is Jesus, go in with him except Peter, John, and James, and the child's mother and father. Meanwhile, all the people were wailing and mourning for her. They're grieving, they're crying. Back in those days, they'd have professional wailers come that would just cry outside the house as a show of grief. And Jesus says, "Stop wailing." He actually probably said it nicer than that. That's how I talk to my children. "Stop whining." He probably said it more like, "Stop wailing. She's not dead, but asleep." Idiot. It's so frustrating when somebody does not understand the gravity of a situation and you have to explain it to them. Jesus, let me break this down for you. But is it possible here we see Jesus in the way that he sees this, that death is not an obstacle? That he is just as confident that if she were asleep, he'd be able to wake her up. That's the authority he's operating in. Death is not an obstacle for God. They laughed at him knowing she was dead, but he took her by the hand and said, "My child, get up." Jesus takes her by the hand. He touches somebody dead. Again, that is considered an unclean practice. Jewish doctors were not actually great doctors because they couldn't touch a dead thing. So they could never touch a cadaver or touch any kind of a dead body to understand and learn more. So he's breaking another ceremonial and cultural norm. He touches this dead girl. Her spirit returned, and once she stood up, Jesus told them to give her something to eat. Food is always a priority in my books. Her parents were astonished. I love a good underdog story. They were astonished, but he ordered them not to tell anybody what happened. I always find that so weird in any of these miracles. Often Jesus says, "But please tell no one." And I'm always like, why is that? And this is what I gather. I gather that it's because often we seek the miracle more than we seek the miracle maker. It's because he didn't want to be known as Jesus who performs miracles, but he wanted to be known as Jesus, the Son of God. Jesus, the Messiah, the one who was going to bring a greater way, a better way. Because in this moment, Jesus has just done 2 miracles. One of them, he has absolutely beaten disease. So do you see this? His authority over the weather, over the demonic, over disease, and now the grand finale, over death. It is so powerful. But Jesus knew that miracles do not always lead to people having faith. Sometimes it just leads to looky-loos, like, oh, that is so interesting over there, right? We do that with car accidents. We're always like, try to drive your car and see what happened as you're going. You just want to look. You don't want to be involved. But Jesus knew that faith was the breeding ground for miracles. You see what I'm saying? One precedes the other. Ultimately, we are suffering from the same condition of the soul, all of us. We're suffering an illness, we're suffering a disconnect from God. That is the illness that we are all suffering from in some degree or another. And C.S. Lewis, to sum it up, has this beautiful quote: "If we find ourselves with a desire that nothing in this world can satisfy, the most probable explanation is we were not made for this world." We're looking for that quick fix. But that one quick fix, for some reason, it just didn't relieve it like I thought it would. So I go to another, I should try acupuncture this time. See if that'll fix it. Right? We go from one doctor or one specialist, and that didn't fix it, and they actually want me to eat better, and that's just too much work. Like, don't you have something you could prescribe? But this is what I'm going to tell you right now. This is why Jesus is the great physician. Number one, physicians level the playing field. I looked for the author of this quote. I couldn't find it, but this is just so good. It has been said that a lawyer sees men at their worst, a minister sees men at their best, a doctor sees men as they are. A doctor strips the accidental externals of life. Somebody that you view in high regard, some celebrity or politician or whatever, they need a doctor just as much as you do. And their doctor knows every weird mole, every weird bump, that whoever that perfect celebrity you idolize is, they've got a doctor. They know their issues. They know that weird rash. They know it all. Because it levels the playing field. There's no title, there's no nothing when it comes to medicine. Cancer doesn't discriminate. Illness doesn't discriminate. You hear of things all the time. They were so healthy, and then this diagnosis just threw us for a loop. You can hide a lot from a lot of people, but you can't hide it from your doctor. God isn't impressed by the same things we're impressed with: status, money, wealth. Your heart health is what matters to him most. And I don't mean your cardiology health, okay? But your soul, the condition of your soul. We look at all of these outer things, these external things. That's going to fix it. That's going to make me happy. If I just had that much more money, if I could just lose that much weight, everything would be better in my life. We're looking for that quick fix. But God's saying, listen, I've seen the human condition over and over and over again. There's no hierarchy in the kingdom of God. We are all souls with a disconnect from God. Second, physicians are not repulsed by conditions. We have a deal in our marriage. I deal with puke and bodily fluids, and Jordan deals with taxes. Because both of us are not good at the others. He is repulsed by anything medical. I love a good medical drama. I love taking my first aid course, like a compound fracture with a bone sticking out. That is so interesting. And Jordan's like, ooh, ooh, ooh. But that's not doctors. Doctors are expecting it. Doctors expect a level of ick. That's what they're trained for. Who in your life have you ever witnessed a friend that they broke their leg and they're like, it's actually really broken. It's like really, really broken. So I'm just going to wait till it gets a bit better and then I'm going to go to the doctor. Like, I don't think they want to see this. They're going to be super grossed out. So I'm just going to manage it. And then when I get it figured out, then I will go and see the doctor. What? You would tell your friend, absolutely not. You do not have the skills. You do not have the training. You need somebody who's going to be able to repair that correctly. Why do we do this with God? We're like, I'll just get better. I'll do it. I'll figure it out, and then I'll come to God. I'll come to church once I've got these things under control. God's like, no. I am the great physician. And I don't want you to hear what I'm not saying. Sometimes it's really easy to assume what I'm saying here is like, you just need more faith. We've all heard that like health, wealth, and prosperity gospel of, if you just do the right things, you give the right amount of money, God will bless you. That is not what I'm saying here. Because we all know you have been desperate. You have begged God, and things still don't go your way. Can I just tell you, that is not your fault. That is the condition of a broken world. And so what I am saying is that he is able to provide a hope. He is able to provide a peace. He is able to provide something that is not based on your circumstances, because don't let your circumstances dictate if God is good or not. Because even if you do not receive that healing or that breakthrough on this side of heaven, it is guaranteed on the other side. That's the hope that we have. It's not based in this world. We see that in Scripture even. Paul wrestles with a thorn in his flesh his entire ministry. One of the most devout, celebrated followers of Jesus. It is never relieved. And lastly, physicians put their own lives on the line with the conviction of helping others. We saw this during the beginning of COVID, that there was no cure, there was no antidote, there was no nothing, and physicians continued to go in right into the line of fire. Doctors, nurses, geared up. That's what they were dealing with. We see this in war-torn places. You have doctors on the front lines treating the wounded, treating the victims of war. There's a conviction to bring healing to those people. Jesus did the same. Jesus laid down his life so that we could have wholeness. Jesus is the greater physician. I'm going to call the band up, or the keys up. And I want to end with this. There is one thing physicians cannot do. Physicians cannot make you come to them. They cannot force you to come to them. And even when you get there, you still have to be honest with them. It's like, that's so weird that you continue to have this weird high blood pressure thing, and all you're doing is you're eating salad and you're working out regularly and you have high blood pressure? Yeah, I don't know, it's so weird. There's like pepperoni sticks falling into your back pocket. You have to be honest. Jesus says, don't let the children be hindered from coming to me. You know what it is about children? Is they're brutally honest. Even when you don't ask them. My son this morning comes in, I'm getting ready for church. He's like, Mom, sometimes after I go to the bathroom, I wash my hands, and sometimes I don't. Like, son, thank you for sharing that with me. And then we were able to have a conversation about good hygiene. We were able to maybe have a moment of teaching there because he was honest. Are you being honest? That condition of your soul? How is the condition of your soul? Man, this life of faith, this life with Jesus, it's messy. It's not easy. It's not come to Jesus and it's all fixed. But you know what we see in these two stories? We see this woman with the issue of blood, and we see Jairus, and both of them, they were proactive. They reached out. They fell at Jesus' feet because they were desperate. They were desperate. That's what we need. We need to be desperate. That God, there is no other way to do this life. I need the way that you have prescribed, the way you have set out, laying down all other promises of this world, that if you just do these things, if you meditate daily for 15 minutes. But no, it's following the way of Jesus. It's a better way. And it's not straightforward, and it's different for everyone, and you're coming with different illnesses and different deformities and different things going on in your life that are a challenge for you. But everybody's got them. I can promise you. I know of at least one doctor sitting in this room, and they could confirm that too. Everybody's got stuff. That's why we believe in small groups, is because we're like, hey, what are you bringing? How does this fit for you? How does that work? We're wrestling through it. Because life is messy. It's not a quick fix. But oh my gosh, the miraculous wholeness that is available because of Jesus. It restores life to every area, your faith and your relationship with God. It isn't just meant for Sundays. It isn't just the self-serving, self-life improvement service. Jesus is my life coach. So blessed. Hashtag, I've got the wooden cutout thing on my wall. It's connection with the Father. It's relationship. That's what we're saying today. Jesus invites you. He says, come to me, all who are weary and heavy laden. I will give you rest. It's not a quick fix, friends, but there is peace. There is joy that is available beyond circumstance. Even if your circumstances don't change, God still remains on the throne. Father, we love you. We're so thankful for the way you love us, for your tenderness, God. And we just thank you today, Lord. And I just pray for anybody in this room that their heart is stirring, or they just feel a tap on the shoulder that this message is speaking to them, and maybe they've got things to lay down, or maybe they don't have a relationship with you. God, I pray today that this would be the mark and the beginning of something new. God, would you just be working your gentle, compassionate dignity. God, we know that even when we come and we just feel like we feel silly or we feel embarrassed, God, you just love us. You greet us with joy, you greet us with compassion, and you restore dignity. You give life. You are the giver, you are the author of life. We love you, Jesus. Amen.